flying solo today, bouncing my takes off the wall in front of me. The postseason race becomes clearer each week as top teams extend their division lead. Plus, a look ahead toward Week 12's game slate. All that and more right here on Coast Knows Ball. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I am Anthony, your main host this week, because I'm the only one here. I'm flying solo this week on Friday, November 21st, so a little bit later than when we usually record these episodes, and that, of course, means as well that Thursday Night Football has commenced already. I watched a significant portion of that game, had some obligations outside of it, but got the meaningful stuff through, and so we'll be talking about that. We'll be debriefing on that game, as well as, of course, the other games from Week 11 in our tier list here. Hope everyone's doing well, and of course, as usual, if you really enjoy the content that's about to come at you here in this episode, please consider sticking around for more each week. Coast Knows Ball is here, as well as our main show, Coast to Coast, where we do a lot more variety stuff on the channel. It's really fun, it's really exciting, and if you enjoy it, please consider sticking around and seeing what a full show looks like with all three of us here, with Vitor, Jacob, and myself. But today, just me, and we're going to get right into the tier list here. This is for Week 11, so I'm going to take into account the Buffalo-Houston game as well, just because it's going to be hard for me to not think about that game when I put these teams into tiers. So unfortunately, those two teams will have 2 games of stock put into this tier list, and that's purely on me there. That was my mistake. I was not able to get any recording out soon enough for that, but we're here now, and without fail, we're gonna keep talking football as much as we can. So let's just get this started. We're going alphabetical order, and of course our tiers are superheroes, supervillains, super cursed, and Super Bowl in our S tier. Then all aboard, choo choo. Basically, it's time to hop on the hype train to some of these teams as they make their playoff odds exponentially greater as we go along. Bougie tier is our typical B tier, so it's still there. Then we've got cream and crap, of course, referencing cream of the crop in the first half of that. Look, these teams, they can be great one week and really terrible the next week, and I think that really sums up our C tier so far this season. A lot of movement in the middle of this tier list every week. And then we got Dead Men Walking, which has also been a mainstay for us at D tier. And then Football is Fun, right? is our F tier again this week. Of course, reserved for those teams that are, very much not making the playoffs this season and potentially vying for that number 1 overall pick, or at least a top 5 pick. And we'll kick it off, actually. Instead of going alphabetically, we'll just kick it off and put some of these teams down at the bottom that deserve to be there. The Titans, Jets, Raiders, the Saints, the Giants. I think it's worthwhile to put them down there at this point in the season. Who else? The Dolphins have an argument, though they've played a lot better ball recently, and I'm going to agree with that. I think Dead Men Walking is a fair spot for them, which is where we had them last week, as you can see. Just, I guess, as a quick thing to talk about with a lot of these teams here at the bottom tier, and as I'm going to move the Browns up as well. The Jets did beat the Browns, so I am going to give them that head-to-head edge over them. And you know what? I'm actually going to pick them over the Raiders at this point as well. I really don't care to talk about these teams very much in this bottom tier anymore. They are just really, really awful, and some of them, need to fire their coach. Some of them need to get some kind of life into these orgs, and I think obviously through the draft is going to be a big deal for a lot of these teams. A team like the Jets, who just had a huge sale on a lot of their big players, especially on defense, at this trade deadline, and they got a lot of draft capital out of those guys. So this could be something that, if we believe in an Aaron Glenn staff here, which I don't know if I do at this point right now. I think he's really done an awful job so far as the head coach of the Jets, and I wasn't too optimistic about it anyway. I think I gave it a B- or C+ as far as the hiring was concerned. I think a lively person and maybe a solid character to have in a locker room, but head coach material, I don't think we're seeing that. 12 weeks into the season, and I don't think it was ever really there in the first place. So we'll see what they do about it. Same thing with the Raiders. Pete Carroll, legendary head coach, not only in the NFL, but also very good track record in college too. But I just don't get coming back to a head coaching position for this Raiders team going into the year. That was weird. But you have optimism about that. He's a no nonsense type of guy. He can really turn this team around, with some positive influence in an organization that's really had none of that over the last 20 years. But man, it's really a train wreck over there. And I think his coaching staff outside of him as well is really, really performing poorly. I don't understand how you have Ashton Janty drafted at the 6th overall pick, and you only give him 6 carries for 7 yards against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. I think that is absolutely atrocious. It's kind of a joke, to be honest. And I understand 6 carries for 7 yards is not going to cut it, but it's one, it's not completely on him, and two, a lot of it. Like, you weren't running the ball when you were only behind by a little bit, and then once you get down by a lot, of course you're going to not run the ball as much anymore. But you had I think it was 2 carries in the first half for Janty. Like, you're not going to win any kind of football games with that kind of decision making. I think it's complete malpractice. So maybe the Raiders look to move on from Pete Carroll as well. Of course, the Titans already have moved on from Brian Callahan. I just don't know if they're going to be able to acquire a big name in this next head coaching pool, because I just don't see many people who are going to be very optimistic about this roster. Having the first overall pick, if they do maintain it at this point, it is in their control. If they maintain that, then maybe there's some more optimism there, because you'd like to think you have the quarterback figured out. Maybe you can, trade down and get a nice haul for the first overall pick, especially in a quarterback heavy class where there seem to be a lot of teams that are going to be vying for a top quarterback in this draft. So, maybe they can pull something off there, and maybe that's attractive for a certain head coach. But man, the roster construction here, and I think just how backwards they've been over the last couple of years because of Brian Callahan's poor leadership with this team is really a tough sell for. I think it's going to be a tough sell for a lot of the more attractive head coaching options that might be looking at, a team like the Raiders, if that vacancy is happens. They have a guy like Janty, they have a guy like Bowers, they have Max Crosby on the other side. There's a lot more upside, I think, in that roster than with the Tennessee Titans. And maybe a team, or maybe a head coach rather, would jump on that choice over the Titans. And so I'm not very optimistic about the Titans going forward either, which is really unfortunate. The Cleveland Browns, it's time for Kevin Stefanski to go. I really don't understand how he has a job anymore at this point. I don't understand how he's had 2 Coach of the Year awards for this team. He's been pretty bad, like, throughout his entire career, frankly. The 2 seasons that he won Coach of the Year, like, very arguable that he was the best coach or the most impressive coach of those seasons. And, obviously there were 2 seasons where the Browns made the playoffs, and I guess that in itself is a big achievement. But man, I just I don't understand how Kevin Stefanski, of all coaches in the NFL, has 2 Coach of the Year awards under his belt, because it's been almost 3 years now, and his offense has been the problem with that team. It's absolutely atrocious. I think his play calling, dating back to 3 years ago as well, has been absolutely atrocious. I don't think he adds anything to this team right now, and I don't know how he hasn't been fired already, but I really think he's on borrowed time at this point. Dayball's been fired, of course, already. Definitely agree with that move. Funny enough, I feel like I've been kind of the contrarian with Brian Daboll this whole time, where I was calling for him to get fired after 2023 season and how poor that performance was. But a lot of people wanted to hang on to him, and keep riding through him. And now that Jackson Dart has emerged onto the scene and clearly has shown promise, people wanted to hold on to Brian Daboll once again, because look, he's found the quarterback. Maybe this can be a corner turner, but I just don't care, really. Like, I just don't care. I think you can get someone way more competent at their job to come in here and immediately turn this team around. And that goes for the defensive coaching as well. Shane Bowen, I don't understand why this defense is as bad as it is. It doesn't make much sense to me at all, because the talent on the field is clearly present. And to have one of the worst rushing defenses in the entire league with Dexter Lawrence up the middle, and of course, I mean, just a loaded edge room with Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, it makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't get how this defense is this bad. And it really, I mean, because I don't get it, that means it comes down to coaching. It just comes down to coaching. And coaching is maybe the most important thing in the NFL generally anyway, maybe outside of your quarterback. But like, even then, that's arguable. If you have a good quarterback and not a good coach, you're not going to win. I've seen great coaches with mediocre at best quarterbacks win a lot of games in the NFL. So I think the teams that know that they don't have something with their head coach are better off not wasting their time. And I think time and time again in the NFL, we see certain teams allow a much longer leash to a head coach that does not deserve it, and they're completely wasting their time and wasting the careers of the talented players that they do end up drafting. They're wasting their time as well. I think about the Cleveland Browns, and I think about Myles Garrett, and he's not, of course, totally blameless in this scenario, because he signed a crazy extension with the Cleveland Browns to stay there and play on an awful football team where he could have gotten that money somewhere else. Absolutely. And here he is playing like a defensive player of the year. He's probably the favorite. I don't know the betting odds, but I would imagine he's the favorite, and he should, for all intents and purposes, win defensive player of the year this season so far. And yet here he is in the F tier because the rest of his team is dog shit, so it's really unfortunate that front offices and owners waste so much time with clearly not the correct talent mentoring these guys. But anyway, I don't want to talk about these teams that I've already ranked anymore. We're going to move on to the Cardinals, who I also believed belong in Dead Men Walking at this point. Jacoby Brissett broke the completions record for a single game against the 49ers last week, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, pretty surreal. And it'll be a really fun trivia question, I think, in 10 years time, like, name the last 5 people to hold the completions record, and Jacoby Brissett is, maybe he still holds the record by then, or maybe he's in the top 5 still, and that's like the trick question nobody expected. But look, the reason he has that is because it's a dink and dunk offense right now, and it's a dink and dunk offense because they're playing by so far behind in this game against the 49ers, who I will just promptly put. I think at this point, probably toward the bottom of all aboard. Of course, they're at the front of it here because they're the only team so far. But I really think that the Brock Purdy insertion into this offense is one. It already showed its effect against the Cardinals on Sunday. And, I get it. It's the Cardinals. But it's not a defense that has, been slouching all season. The defense has been a large reason why this team has been in games so far this year, where the offense has sputtered a lot of the time. But you really could tell a difference. And this is nothing against Mac Jones. I think he's a very serviceable quarterback in this league, with a very high-end backup or low-end starter upside. I think, there could be a couple of teams that don't have, that potential to draft a quarterback in this draft that might give the 49ers a call about Mac Jones and his availability in the offseason. Whether the 49ers take that kind of deal because they have another year control and they know what they're going to get with Mac Jones, which is obviously like a good fit for the system, and they can still win games. And that's been a big problem for the 49ers, is as soon as a quarterback goes down in this system, in the past few years, like it feels like the brakes have come off, and it becomes a crazy train. But my point is, though, with the difference here is Mac Jones ran a simple offense that ran very short yardage throws and quick passes, quick decisions, and a lot of checkdowns as well on top of that for the longer plays. And he was very good at that, and I commend him greatly for that, especially as a 49er fan, to see the team still win and be very competitive while he's in there. And he certainly wasn't the issue with the team, in their losses when he was starting, not necessarily at least. But you could just tell that Brock Purdy just adds an extra layer to this team. He adds a vertical threat, and a lot of people were suggesting that Mac Jones would add the vertical threat, but Mac Jones really didn't throw downfield at all. But here we are immediately in Brock Purdy's first game back, and he's throwing downfield, and I really liked that. I liked the aggressiveness in this one. There were a few plays that were turnover worthy and definitely don't want to see those going forward, but I think a gunslinger type of player is going to have those kinds of lapses every game. And I think I will take one or two of those lapses. Of course, I don't want them to be interceptions every time, but I will take one or two of those lapses for the many successes that he also had in the game on Sunday. And on top of that, to tie into it with the George Kittle touchdown on the second possession of the game, technically, that was an audible called by Brock. And it was an audible after he figured out what the matchup was, in man coverage where George Kittle was lined up on the linebacker. And that's another thing that this offense gets with Brock is he is now comfortable enough in this offense after being around for a while to call audibles and to change up the play based on the coverage that he's seeing. And I think that is just, it showcases so much confidence with this football team. It showcases so much confidence from Kyle Shanahan to allow him to do that, right? Again, sprouting arguments or debates surrounding the system and whatever that means. It's a very nebulous thing, I think. And then, of course, the added mobility. It wasn't very much on showcase against the Cardinals because I do think he's still obviously nursing the turf toe injury, and he's trying to not make it worse and trying to just mitigate it as best as he can. Although he looked very poised for the most part. He was still very strong in the pocket. He had a very strong base on a lot of throws, which I really like. It's, again, just some of those decision-making type of things, type of issues that we saw a little bit early in the year, especially against of course, against the Seattle game, one of his 3 games that he started. And if we can clean these up, this can be a very, very scary team come the postseason that can steal a game or two from, I think, better teams in the postseason. And the reason I don't consider them Super Bowl contenders quite yet as a Niner fan it's just that the defense is so depleted. There are a number of starting players, not only starting, but all pro level players, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, namely, that are not playing and won't be playing the rest of the season. And that's just a huge blow. And they keep taking them every week. Tatum Bethune is now out for the Monday night game against the Panthers, I believe. And, he was playing well in relief of Fred Warner, and now he's not going to be available. And that's just another ding to this defense that is just bleeding, hemorrhaging players and hemorrhaging health. And that's brutal, and it's really unfortunate because Robert Saleh's back and they were balling out in the first few games when the unit was healthy. But if there's anything holding this team back, it's going to be that. It's going to be the defensive depletion. It's going to be the lack of personnel. They're not going to be able to do what they want to do on defense. They're not going to be able to impose their will, win at the line of scrimmage when they have so many key players out for the rest of the season or out for an extended period. And that of course starts with the pass rush. The pass rush was completely non-existent against the Cardinals, and I get it. It's you're playing up the whole time. It's not a big deal, but 57 dropbacks from Jacoby Brissett and 47 completions, of course. Not a single sack and only a handful of quarterback hits and pressures. That's not acceptable. It's not enough, and that to me is not emblematic of a team that's going too far into the playoffs. So again, I think they can steal a game, maybe 2, if they get really lucky, or if Fred Warner potentially comes back for a division rival, or divisional round matchup rather. If that even happens, of course, that's very, very optimistic. But yeah, so I really love the way that they're headed, and if they can get healthier, I think that's awesome for them. But I think you still have to credit them right now, even if they might not have too much potential come playoff time. But they possess the playoff spot right now. They control their own destiny. So just keep moving forward. I'm gonna run through a couple of these quickly because I spent a lot of time in that game. I just needed to get on my soapbox there real quick about the 49ers and how they look. The Falcons, Deadman walking, we're almost in football is fun with the Falcons here, especially with the Michael Penix injury. I just don't, and I'm done with Raheem Morris. I think we all said that on our quarterback tier list a few weeks ago that we're kind of just done. He doesn't seem to be the head coaching type. He doesn't seem to be a fit for any team really. His attitude isn't there. His vigor isn't there. I don't think. And I think it shows every week with how inconsistent this team is, how many games that they have lost that they should have won this season so far. And it's only going to look worse with Michael Penix out, I think. And I don't think too highly of Michael Penix anyway. I don't think he's been very impressive this year. But I mean, Kirk Cousins is your backup, and the last couple of times he's been on the field, he's been pretty atrocious. So I have no confidence in this team. I have no confidence in this coaching staff, and now they don't have a first round pick in this draft, and the Rams, who possess that, are picking in the top 10 because of that. And while we're here, I'll just put them in superheroes, supervillains, super cursed, Super Bowl. Of course, we have the super curse there because it seems like at least one team each week that we put up there winds up cursed the next week and loses. But look, this team is rolling. They're kind of unstoppable on offense. The defense is also playing very well, creating turnovers, creating stops. Just a all around very cohesive team. They're fixing up the special teams with the new kicker. Now the Joshua Cardi's no longer their kicker there. And it's kind of undeniable at this point. They seem to be the class of the NFL right now. Hopefully they get stopped because we've been over this. But Ravens now up since they've since Lamar's been back. Honestly, since the Bears game actually, which is Tyler Huntley was playing in that one. Obviously, a better fit in this offense than Cooper Rush. Anybody could have told you that. I mean, Tyler Huntley's a Pro Bowler in this offense, but they started 1-5, and what are they, 6-5 now, 5-5? I have the record prediction up here. Not, damn it, NFL standings. Yeah, 5-5. So they started 1-5, and they've won 4 straight. That's pretty impressive regardless of their competition. And a game like the Cleveland Browns, it's a divisional game. The Browns have always given them some kind of trouble in the regular season, so I'm not too bothered by that. And they did end up pulling off a win that they should have in the end, so well done for the Ravens. They're going to definitely be in bougie. I think they're going to make a play for the division there. And of course, they're only one game back now. With the Steelers at 6-4 and the Ravens at 5-5, that is a very winnable division for the Ravens, especially when I'm not too confident in what the Steelers have going on. The Buffalo Bills, now they won against the Buccaneers, which was a very impressive win, I thought. Especially offensively, Josh Allen was just kind of unstoppable. He was imposing his will in that game. But then, the Houston game, and I'll put right up here, I did predict Houston to win this game. And I guess we could talk about that briefly here. And as I put Houston in cream and crap right now, but the reason I thought Houston was going to win is pretty much exactly what happened in the game. That the number one defense, in my opinion, in the NFL right now, being the Texans, was just going to overwhelm an offense that is way too reliant on Josh Allen and James Cook doing their thing. I don't understand why Joe Brady is getting head coach buzz in the next circuit. I think that would be a huge mistake. Any team that hires him, I think, for a head coaching spot would be making a mistake, and he would be out of that job within a couple years because he doesn't do anything. He is not an elevator of this offense. He doesn't do anything. This team is bereft of weapons at receiver. It's about Khalil Shakir versus everybody. Now, a couple of guys have stepped up here and there every couple weeks or whatnot, but it's so obvious they're missing a separator that can get open in the middle of the field, an intermediate game, some guy who's versatile. And that's why I linked them to Chris Olave at the trade deadline. I thought that would have been a perfect fit for them. It's an exact receiver that they need in this type of offense. But they didn't go out and do it. They didn't go out and get any receiver. They went and signed Gabe Davis off the streets again, who is just dreadful. I don't I don't like Gabe Davis at all. I have not liked Gabe Davis at all, even after that NFC Championship game where he had 4 touchdowns and was getting all the hype in the world. I didn't buy into it. Um, but yeah, and I really thought it was going to be a close game. Uh, the fact that Stroud wasn't playing actually made it more interesting, I would say, for my pick. But I did still end up leaning Texans, and I'm happy I did, just because again the defense was too overwhelming. And look, they got 8 sacks, they forced 2 turnovers. One of them was the game-sealing interception, and I think also, though, the Texans' offense has been a little bit better, not by much, but a little bit better and a little bit more less inept, I guess, if you will, and more dynamic. But it's mostly not because Davis Mills is necessarily better than Stroud, although I think he's performing better than he has been this season. It's just because he gets the ball out quicker, and that we know that Stroud holds onto the ball way too long, steps into a lot of sacks. And while the offensive line is not good, it is one of the worst units in the NFL. CJ Stroud makes it look worse by not having a strong pocket presence. Davis Mills, however, gets rid of the ball quickly. He doesn't force mistakes like that. He doesn't force miscues and mishaps like that. And yeah, I think he's fairly careful with the football. I think is one of the higher end backups in the league. And it's no wonder to me that the Houston Texans are able to, rip off a couple wins here when Stroud is out of the game. Now, would they have won these same games if Stroud was playing? That's very much a possibility, and they probably do end up doing so. But I really think that it's helped the team a little bit get some more life into this offense when, they don't have a quarterback taking a bunch of sacks that are, arguably unnecessary. Okay. The Carolina Panthers, I'm going to put them in bougie. I did not think that they would sweep the Falcons this season. They won the first one 30-0, and that was a surprise in and of itself. But wow, I mean, what an impressive performance by Bryce Young. That's my stud of the week. Over 450 yards, I think 4 total touchdowns, maybe it was 3. But when the run game wasn't as effective as they would like, he stepped up in a big moment against a big division opponent and keeping themselves very alive, not only in the playoff race and the wildcard race, but in the division race, because the Buccaneers are really struggling right now. And that was a gutsy performance and a really nice come from behind victory as well. A little bit of a choke job by the Falcons, I think, because they had a 2-score lead for a significant portion of the game, and they were leading for almost all of it. But yeah, wait for the Panthers to stick into the game and play some gutsy defense too at times in that game. And the defense has been so much better this season than it was last year as well. Last year we were talking about maybe the worst rushing defense in the NFL, but I mean the both times that they played the Falcons, they were able to stop Bijan Robinson and that rushing attack. So massive props to them. Well done, good win. And yeah, they've earned bougie at this point. The Chicago Bears, I think, here's the problem. Like the Bears lost to the Ravens about a month ago, and now the Ravens have Lamar. And I do think probably the Ravens are a better team than them, but the Bears are winning that division. I think, man, do I even put them in bougie in the first place? They might be all aboard. The problem is that they've been very fortunate, I think, and not that they're not a clutch team. They are a very clutch team, and that is a huge indicator of a team that can go deep in a playoff race and can win a division is their clutch ability. But I think some of it has also been very fortunate. They've won 2 games by 1 score. 2 of those games came off of a missed field goal, I believe. One of them was blocked. The most recent game against the Vikings was they were up the whole game, and then all of a sudden they're losing with 40 seconds left, and then a big kick return sets them up for the game-winning field goal, and just a lot of that kind of football that makes them feel like a very fortunate team. And I think that they are a good team, but they haven't won in the most convincing of ways to suggest an A tier quite yet. I think they're in bougie. I'm gonna lean them above the Ravens. I think the pedigree is a little bit better, maybe, especially over the last couple of weeks, and the loss against them was about a month ago anyway. So but they'll probably be at the top of B. The Cincinnati Bengals, oh, man, we have so many teams in F tier, but I really think they're probably the next team that I would add to the F tier if I really felt like it, because they're just dreadful. Zach Taylor's got to go. I really think that this is his time once again. The whole front office could probably use a clean slate. Uh, I don't think there's any, if Joe Burrow comes back and he's healthy by to end the season, that's great, but there's no reason to rush him back in a lost season now. The defense is absolutely pathetic, I think. Not to shit on players or anything like that. I don't like to do that on this show, but I'm just calling it the way I see it. I think everybody with eyes that watches football knows that the Bengals defense is absolutely dreadful. It almost feels irregardless of whether a guy like Trey Hendrickson is playing, and he hasn't been playing. Of course, he's dealing with an injury. But yeah, again, nothing optimistic to say. Like, all these teams could just be in football is fun, because except for maybe the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been pretty impressive the last few weeks in their wins. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to have them pretty interchangeable. I'm going to lean them ahead of the Houston Texans in C tier here. A really nice win against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Really impressed with the offensive output, really impressed with some of the newcomers on defense. And it doesn't feel like a completely changed unit, after 1 week. But it does feel improved, and it does feel like this can be some momentum for them, and they can potentially go on a run here in an NFC that could have a really wide open 7 seed. I mean, that will remain to be seen as we go along, but they're going to be a really tough out the rest of the season. And come January, I wouldn't be shocked if they were a game out or in the playoff picture in general. Next up, the Denver Broncos. I'm going to have them in all aboard. I'm going to have them, oh man, if I think I'd take the Bills right now, head to head. Yeah, I think so. Another big win against the Chiefs. That's what, 3 in a row now for the Broncos over the Chiefs, and that's pretty huge in a division like that, against a team like that with that kind of pedigree over the last a near decade at this point. But well done for the Broncos getting another win. I think it's one of the weaker teams that we've seen with this kind of a record, with the 2-loss record, 9-2. I don't think they're nearly as strong as their record, but I do think that they are a capable football team. And in large part, it's because of how strong their defense is. They can generate pass rush on pretty much any down of the game. It's really a dominant unit there. And in the secondary, despite Patrick Surtain nursing his injury, they're still able to lock down guys. The Chiefs couldn't really get anything going offensively. They couldn't get a run game going. They couldn't really get a pass game going. And so, yeah, impressive win for the Broncos. It's probably their division. It's definitely their division to lose at this point, but they probably have it sealed. It would probably take a really big catastrophic decline, which I can't say is out of the question, because this team has won some very weak games this season, or games that they just had no business being in, but the other team completely imploded. But it keeps happening is kind of my point. And at some point you just have to just brush it aside and say, hey, look, they're 9-2. They are guaranteed a better than 500 record for the season already. So yeah, give them props. Detroit Lions, man, they're neck and neck to me with the Panthers right now. I think I'm going to put them behind the Panthers just by a bit. Really awful performance on Sunday Night Football. The defense played fairly well, and certainly well enough to keep them in the game throughout the whole time, but I don't know what Dan Campbell was doing. I get it's on brand for the Lions and for him in this kind of game to do that kind of stuff, but it very obviously is the reason they lost this game. To go 0-5, I think it was, on 4th down attempts, you just can't do that. And 2 of those 5, you would have had 6 points on the board if you gone for field goals. Like, that is probably the difference in the game. Plus the missed 2-pointer. I think it was a 2-pointer that they failed to convert, or maybe it was a missed PAT. I don't quite remember that, but regardless, that is a 7-point swing essentially on 3 plays, and that would have tied you the game. unfortunately, of course, it ended on a horrible defensive pass interference call. I cannot stress enough how bad that call was, but I still believe the better team won the football game. They held the lead pretty much the whole time, even if it was minuscule, and their defense was much more stifling, obviously, than the Lions' offense was dominant. So I definitely have real concerns about the Lions going forward here. It seems like the decline of the team without Ben Johnson is finally settling in after, a couple of months where they were seemed to be riding on, you know, something like riding on those coattails, and now the coattails are leaving. They're being outrun by the Ben Johnson led team in this division. And yeah, it's not looking too good. Dare I say it might be the beginning of the end for this team going forward, not just this season, but in seasons forward. I mean, that remains to be seen, of course. The off season will tell us a lot about what the Lions are, but I still think that they're going to be a tough out every week. I still think that they can certainly vie for a playoff spot, potentially, of course, make it, potentially still win the division. They still have a matchup with the Bears. They're only a game behind. It's not all doom and gloom quite yet for the Lions, but they are definitely trending downward at this point. And the Packers, I'm going to put right next to them. It doesn't really matter where they go, I don't think. They did just lose to the Panthers a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to stick with that there. Kind of similar things that I have to say about the Packers that I do about the Lions. I personally don't conceive. I don't yet giving Jordan Love that kind of deal, and I think finally he plays in a game that kind of makes him seem worth that kind of money in that contract against the Giants. But that only really happened, I thought, until after he came back, when Malik Willis was playing in relief of him for a series. Once that happened, something kind of clicked in Jordan Love, and he was very clutch. He was very accurate. He made some really tough throws. Before that, I don't believe it was the same case. There were a lot of drops by the receivers this week as well. That does not help whatsoever. But they're also going to be fighting in this division. It really is a three-legged race right now. They have two matchups against the Bears coming up, so that's going to be crucial for the playoff race, for playoff seeding. But I really don't have too much confidence in the Packers going forward in this season. I think they could limp down the stretch here. I don't know. We'll see, but not very impressed with them, despite the win this week. The Colts, they were on a bye. Where were they last week? They were in the A tier, pretty high up in the A tier. So we're definitely gonna have the Bills behind them, and I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's good. I might have the, oh man, see, this is tough. I think the Bills beat the Broncos, but maybe they don't, because similar argument to what I said about the Texans. I think, oh man, I think the Bills might be here. I think the Broncos might be ahead of them right now. Yeah, I like that better. Look, Colts, huge success story in the NFL this season. It's been a lot of fun to watch, so congrats to them. Not much else to say because they didn't play. Jacksonville Jaguars, big win against the Los Angeles Chargers this week at home, really keeping them relevant in the playoff race here. The problem is that there are weeks where they are the cream, and there are weeks where they are the crap of the NFL. And I think this is the tier that is perfect for a team like the Jaguars. They're dominant at home, it feels like, for the most part. They're opportunistic on defense. They're able to create turnovers when they need to, I suppose, or on occasion. And the offense, when it clicks, it really clicks, but it does not happen every week. And I'm not going to be convinced by one game against the Los Angeles Chargers, who have really struggled to be consistent over the last month and a half. But look, they're keeping themselves relevant. I do, at this moment, have them sneaking into the postseason with a 6th or 7th seed there, because the AFC really, as far as the wild card race is concerned, is pretty wide open. And they're one of those teams with a 6-5 record, 6-4 record. They're one of those teams that's right in the mix right now. So Big win, good win, especially against the Chargers. That head-to-head win could mean a lot down the stretch here. The Chargers, on the other hand, I think I'm going to put right behind the Jaguars here in cream and crap. That's how they've been playing for 6 weeks now, essentially. The injuries to the offensive line, losing Joe Alt again certainly does not help. That's brutal stuff. They've had some really tough injury luck this season so far as well. They're one of those teams, but uh, I'm not a fan of the play calling. I'm not a fan of the Herbert not leading this offense. I think he can do a lot more, and I get it. The offensive line is battered with injuries, and Kamadi Vidal left this game early as well, and that's not helpful when you're already super depleted in the run game. But I need to see more from a guy who's supposed to be a top 5 quarterback, who started the season, the first 5 weeks essentially like an MVP caliber quarterback here. I just need to see more. This isn't this shouldn't be the Chargers, and only 6 points against the Jaguars is pretty pathetic, honestly. It just really is. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh man, another one. We had them in A tier the past couple of weeks, and I felt a little uneasy about that at the time, and it really has shown the last couple of weeks now. Loss to the Bills, a loss against the Broncos this week. They might be borderline dead men walking at this point. Of course, they're still into the playoff race, in the playoff mix. I think that they would beat the Texans right now. But man, it's not looking great. The offense isn't clicking. The run game hasn't gotten going. I can't believe they didn't go out and acquire somebody to help fill this running back room. Breece Hall, I feel like, was there for the taking for not just the Chiefs, but for many teams in the NFL that could have used a really talented back like that. And to not get a move done when that's obviously a dire position of need for you is quite puzzling, to say the least. So I don't know what to really make of them right now. I feel like one week they can really turn on the Jets and we're like, oh man, the Chiefs are back. And then the next week they're going to stink it up again. And that's kind of how the beginning of the season was to a degree as well. The Minnesota Vikings, we talked about, briefly in moments here. I'm going to put them in dead men walking. Yeah, probably ahead of the Bengals, maybe ahead of the Falcons right now. I'm not too sure about that. JJ McCarthy looks really bad. Like he's just not ready, I don't think, for this type of role, which is it's just strange to say. But yeah, I don't know I don't know how else to put it really. Just not poised, inaccurate, poor decision making, all the above. It's been a really rough season for them, just as quarterbacking wise in general. It's been a rough season as far as offensive line health. It's been a rough season as far as play calling. I think they have a very talented backfield here with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, and they are kind of good at different things too, which you can really exploit if you know what you're doing. But I'm not sure at this point that Kevin O'Connell really knows what he's doing. He's got disgruntled receivers on the sideline. He's got 2 running backs that he doesn't know what to do with. And he very clearly had a say on what the quarterback situation was going to be going into the year, and not giving a contract to Sam Darnold, for example, or not keeping Daniel Jones on the roster, who is now balling out in Indianapolis, and relying on JJ. And I get it. Like, at some point you're going to need to rely on the rookie quarterback, but it's so clear and obvious at this point. And, hindsight is 2020. I acknowledge that, but it's so clear at this point that he's not ready, and it's honestly maybe not close. I really don't know. It's really unfortunate that he missed his rookie year, because I think, and we're about to talk about the Patriots here, but a Drake May who almost missed a lot of time in his rookie year, and I thought the benching of him to start the year was a fireable offense from Jared Mayo right there, and then he ends up getting fired, of course, last season anyway. But this is the reason why you get your quarterback reps, early on. I don't really get the notion of sitting them being a positive thing, especially if they aren't a refined talent. at the position. There is some benefit to sitting and learning, and I think it has worked in some cases. The Green Bay Packers being one example of that, where Aaron Rodgers gets to sit behind Favre for 3 years, and then he comes in and he plays like an MVP immediately. Or, I don't believe this with Jordan Love, but a lot of people do, where he sits behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 years, and now he is a part of a relevant football team. And you could even say with Dave Canales and Bryce Young, Dave Canales gets the job and basically immediately benches him. And he comes back after being benched for about 6 weeks and balls out, So it does happen sometimes, but these are like outliers to the rule here. I really feel like that. Every other example of this happening, it's very few and far in between. Every single other, like CJ Stroud immediately came in, one of the most impressive rookie seasons ever. Justin Herbert, same thing. Trevor Lawrence came in immediately. Lamar Jackson, no, he didn't come in immediately. He had like 10 or 11 weeks backing up Joe Flacco, but still rookie season. Patrick Mahomes is another example. He sat the whole first year, basically. Alex Smith was his quarterback. Andy Reid's the coach. So again, it's an ideal situation for him. Josh Allen immediately came in, and it took years, and it finally worked out. Matthew Stafford was immediately the quarterback. Of course, he was the first overall pick. Bo Nix immediately the quarterback. Jared Goff immediately the quarterback, and it was really brutal at the beginning, but they stuck with him. So the exception to the rule is the one where you sit the quarterback. It's not the rule. The rule is you draft a quarterback in the top 3, or you trade up to draft a quarterback. You probably should play him. And the fact that he couldn't play in his rookie season, I guess finally getting to my point, I think is particularly brutal, because now you have a team that feels like they would be very competitive with a good quarterback in play, and you don't have one on your roster where you had one last year. Patriots, the class of the AFC, in my opinion, right now, I don't think they look back from this current record. I thought they were a really nice dark horse wildcard candidate going into the year. I had them winning 10 games. So I'm very happy that I was mostly right about this team. And I'm even more happy that it's even better than I expected. And Drake May, probably my MVP right now, just by his quality of play and how much he has elevated this roster. Philadelphia's got to go in A tier. They just are consistently very good at what they do, and it is a boring brand of football, a brand of football that I don't enjoy watching, but I can't deny how strong it is, and I do think that they would probably beat the Broncos a second time around. Seattle, I am not as fazed by what happened on Sunday against the Rams as maybe some other people are, but I honestly think that a lot of people believe that Seattle outplayed the Los Angeles Rams in that game for pretty much the entirety. It's just 4 interceptions is really, really difficult to recover from. And if Darnold throws 3 interceptions in this game, I think that this team probably wins the football game, because it was that close. And the Seahawks offense did outgain the Rams by like 150 yards. And they did stop the Rams, who have been a super potent offense all season pretty much, on several occasions, and kept the team in this game. And really, if there was one less turnover by the Seahawks, they probably win this game. And we're talking about them as the class of the NFC. And we're probably saying, look, they can have a bad day and they'll still win games, and whereas I have my qualms with the Rams, obviously a very, very strong football team, but I don't think that they are quite to the level that a lot of people are talking about, where it's, one of the better teams of the decade or something like that. I think there's very clearly a way to beat them. The Steelers, they're cream and crap, I definitely think they're cream and crap. The 1 week they play well, the next week they don't. And I think that's kind of like the Aaron Rodgers experience. That's kind of the Mike Tomlin experience. That's kind of the Steelers experience, how it's been since Ben Roethlisberger retired. And they'll probably go 9-8 again this season, probably make the playoffs, because why wouldn't they? And they'll be first round exits. So it's the same story with the Steelers every year. Next up, the Buccaneers. I could put them in bougie. Yeah, I probably should. I do prefer the Panthers over them right now. I do prefer the Packers over them. I think I just ahead of the Lions is probably where I'd put them. Although the Lions did beat them a couple weeks ago, about a month ago now. But it, they're just very, very close, these two teams. I think both of them have obviously been declining the last few weeks. Both of them have come off multiple losses in the last few weeks. Just a downward trend, but it's tough to count out teams like this with this much grit and a good defense on the, at least on the Bucs side for sure. And quarterbacks who have done this type of thing before. Baker Mayfield, going into the year in the first 5-6 weeks was having an MVP caliber season. It's obviously dampened since, and the Bucky Irving situation is really unfortunate. I hope that he comes back soon, because that's clearly a very important element of this offense that's missing. But yeah, they're still a tough out every week, but it could be someone else's division going forward. We'll see. And then the Commanders here, just to keep it even, I'll put them in Dead Men Walking, but they're probably football is fun as well. Just really, really hard to watch at this point. And again, decimated by injuries, another one of those teams. And honestly, I think that they're a little bit better right now with Mariota in than with Daniels. I think Daniels so far this year, one, has put himself in harm's way too much. And that's, he's injured, not for that reason. Obviously, the broken arm is a freak accident type of injury, but it's just too much of one guy not open, let's go run, take off. One guy not open, take off. One guy not open, take off. More often than not, when Terry McLaurin is injured and not your number one receiver anymore, your number one guy is probably not going to be open very much, and that's the reality of this situation. That's the reality of the play calling. That's the reality of not having a good or consistent run game. Nobody on this rushing attack just makes the decision that they want to be the feature back. It feels like every time one of them gets to be the feature one week and they don't do anything with that opportunity, so it being the oldest team in the NFL is also brutal because, I don't know. This is not a good football team. And you know what? I am going to do it. Fuck. I'm going to do this. No, we're just going to leave him. We're going to keep the evenness here, and then have of course, our S tier up here, which by our standards here would be our Super Bowl preview. But there we go. That's our tier list this week. I'm going to do some rapid fire picks here for week 12. As I said, I picked the Texans over the Bills on Thursday Night Football, and that did end up correct. So I'm happy about that. The next game on the slate here, the Indianapolis Colts at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Colts coming off a bye, and they've been rolling all season pretty much. A couple of hiccups here and there, but very solid team. And looking forward to new acquisition Sauce Gardner on this defensive side. So should be a really entertaining game for them. And I really think that they impose their will here on the Chiefs, who are reeling right now. They've really struggled to get any kind of consistent offense going. And I think that a team with Charvarius Ward and Sauce Gardner on the opposite end, there's not going to be a lot of separation for these quick passes that the Chiefs have liked to do. And Mahomes, who has been a lot more aggressive in recent weeks, trying to throw downfield, I don't think there are going to be opportunities like that in this game. And so I'm expecting the Chiefs to lose this one as well and fall to 5-6 on the season. Next up, the New England Patriots at the Cincinnati Bengals. I've got the Patriots in this one. Very clearly, obviously the better team. I think they're going to be able to prevent the Bengals from scoring a lot of points in this one, similar to what the Steelers did last week. Jamar Chase not playing in this one is also a big factor, I think, for this offense. And the Patriots probably could put up 40 on this team in this defense. That's one of my bold predictions, we'll say, for this week, that the Patriots put up 40 points. The New York Jets at the Baltimore Ravens. I've got the Ravens in this one. Again, another clear, better team, better coached, all the above, really. Tyrod Taylor maybe can make this a little bit more competitive than with Justin Fields in there. I still don't understand how Justin Fields got that contract. I think that is abysmal general managing. But look, the Ravens are, they need to win as many games as they can at this point, especially when they're only a game back of the Steelers. So every win counts, and you have to win the ones that you should. Next up, the Cleveland Browns at the Las Vegas Raiders. Do I even want to talk about this game? Not really, but I guess I will begrudgingly. I could not care less who wins this game. It's really a toss-up at the same time, though, which kind of, I guess, makes it a little bit entertaining for a toilet bowl type of experience. But I am going to take the Cleveland Browns here. Again, really, really tight. I think Shedeur Sanders being the starting quarterback makes me lean a little bit more toward the Raiders, actually, because I don't think he's very good. He was absolutely putrid when he came in against the Ravens last week. And I get it, not prepared. Got a lot did not get first team reps in practice, all that stuff. I understand that, but I also think it's a very weird thing to be so obsessed with that and say that he was designed or destined to fail when other quarterbacks have come in relief of their starters this season alone, not just this season though, in years past, and completely floored everybody that was watching the game and balled out. Like, we can make every excuse under the sun every day for certain players, but there comes a point where you just need to say, this guy's just not very good. And it was half a game for Shedeur, and that's not too fair to cast judgment that quickly, but I was already not very high on him coming out of college, and I have not liked his attitude at all since then, including off the field issues. And he was absolutely dreadful against the Ravens. A lack of preparation does not make you play the way that he did. A lack of preparation gives you miscues with your receivers. It maybe you're not quite up to the NFL speed. It doesn't do the things that he did or the lack thereof on Sunday against the Ravens. So yeah, he's awful. But I think the difference maker here is the Cleveland defense. They could probably win this game on their own just by creating turnovers, and maybe another pick six is in the works for them against Geno Smith. But again, a game that I could flip and flop on all day. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Chicago Bears. I do have the Bears taking this one. It'll be interesting to see if Rodgers plays. I'm not sure the status of him right now. Just he's questionable, of course, with the broken wrist. I would not want to play on a broken wrist. It's not his throwing arm. I understand, but you take one hit and you fall the wrong way, and that is an even worse issue than before. And who knows, when it's Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers, it might be your own offensive lineman tackling you and breaking your arm again. So I would not play. We shall see. But the Bears are the better team. I think they can create some opportunities here defensively. Mason Rudolph is no slouch. I think is a very solid backup, and there's a reason that Pittsburgh has kept him around for so long as their backup. And so he's capable of winning this game. But the Bears are more loaded and they're more hungry. The Seattle Seahawks on the road against the Tennessee Titans, and what the football schedule gods. What a wonderful bounce back game for the Seahawks to have this week after a really rough one against the Rams. Again, a very winnable game, just brutal game from hell offensively. And here they are, get to tee up against the Titans. Yeah, I mean, enough said, right? Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Arizona Cardinals. This is another one I am 50-50 on, and I see I have the Jaguars labeled here. I'm actually going to switch it right now as I'm thinking about it. The Jaguars have been a really bad road team this year. They played much better at home. And I think that the Cardinals, who have been very pass-heavy in recent weeks, think about Jacoby Brissett breaking the completions record against the Niners last week. This is certainly a defense that you can throw on, and we'll monitor the availability of Marvin Harrison Jr. in this game. But Michael Wilson went off last week, Trey McBride went off last week, and I think if that can continue, and the Arizona Cardinals have been a little bit more potent on offense in general, in Kyler Murray's absence. If that can continue here, at plus the Jaguars being a bad road team, I think this could 100% be a Cardinals win. You would expect the Jaguars to pull it off because they are the better team, and they just got a really impressive win against a really good team last week. But it's any given Sunday, it's up in the air, and this is probably one of my better, or one of the upset picks that I like the most this week. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers. Packers are simply better here. They could get rolling once again after really big hiccup there in the middle of the season. It could be teeing off against a inferior opponent in the Vikings. I just don't expect the Vikings to move the ball very well. They don't run the ball ever, even though they probably could and should. And JJ McCarthy's just bad, so it shouldn't be difficult for the Packers. But it's a division game; you never know what can happen. I can see a Vikings upset, and people are shocked again, just like they were when they beat the Lions a few weeks ago. Next up, the New York Giants at the Detroit Lions. I've got the Lions in this one. Again, a bounce back game after a tough week last week against the Eagles. Now you're at home in a dome against the Giants, who are reeling, maybe not have Jackson Dart. I think it could be deceptively close, even with Jameis Winston playing. I think Jameis Winston, there's not a lot of tape on him on this Giants offense, and they were able to move the ball against the Packers. And if he didn't turn the ball over, that there might be a different result in that game as well, right? But if Jackson Dart plays, I don't expect him to. I don't think. Who knows? I'm not quite sure of the status of him actually right now. But regardless, I'm still going to lean the Lions. But I think it's deceptively close. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints, and another one that I'm going to change my pick on right now. Saints off the bye, but that's not really the reason. Kirk Cousins is playing quarterback right now. The Falcons really can't get anything going, any consistency on offense. Drake London's not expected to play, I don't believe. And Tyler Shuck looked okay against the Cardinals 2 weeks ago in their surprise upset win that ruined my Survivor season. Maybe the defense that isn't very good, because they just don't have, the talent on paper, but is also not a very bad unit either. Maybe they can create a turnover. Maybe they can get something going, or just maybe the Falcons on offense are just that inept that they can't get a play going. This is a game that you expect the Falcons to be able to win because it's the Saints, but I have a feeling about this one. I really do. Jacob's going to hate that. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Another one I think is a very close 50-50 game. And I'm actually going to pick the Dallas Cowboys as well here. I think they could go on a little bit of a run here to close out the season. I really love the additions on defense, and I think that could be a difference maker in this one. But really, I have not been too impressed with the Philadelphia offense this season at all. The play calling, the execution, all of the above. And maybe this is a team or a game against an inferior defense where you can get something going on that side of the football. But again, I just have a feeling, it was a very close bout the first time around in week 1. Granted, that was a long time ago. The teams are a lot different now, but the Cowboys on offense is rolling. Javonte Williams is great. George Pickens has been a huge star. CeeDee Lamb is back, and he played well as well against the Raiders. Another upset pick from me, but one I feel pretty okay about. But a coin toss game. Next up, the Buccaneers at the Los Angeles Rams, and I believe this is Sunday Night Football. Yeah, that's correct. The Rams rolling, the Buccaneers reeling, and I think that trend probably continues this week, especially with the Bucky Irving absence. It's kind of tough to watch, the decline of the Buccaneers so far over the last month and a half here, but they can't get much going on offense. When they do, it feels too overly reliant on one player, so it's easier to game plan against. And the Rams, meanwhile, have been a bit of a freight train, the past few weeks. And I think that trend continues here. I think it's deceptively close once again. I feel like a lot of people are writing the Buccaneers off. Maybe I'm wrong in that regard. But I think this could be a close one, closer than people are expecting, because the Buccaneers are a tough out. They are still a tough team. It's still a gritty defense. They can make the Rams offense potentially one-dimensional. And believe me, I would love to see an upset in this one. Finally, though, we got the Carolina Panthers at the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football. I think this is going to be a complete shootout. I would be shocked if it was more of a defensive game on either front. Both offenses are rolling. Brock Purdy is back. Ricky Pearsall is back. That's a super potent offense. And playing against an opportunistic defense, but I really think that Shanahan's going to have stuff cooked up for this one. And on the other end, Bryce Young had a career best game, in my opinion, against the Falcons last week. 450 yards, several touchdowns, and here he is playing a very depleted 49ers defense that also is opportunistic. They can take advantage and capitalize on his mistakes, but if they can't pressure him, they couldn't pressure Brissett. They haven't really pressured anybody this season. If they can't pressure him and he's able to slice and dice death by 1,000 cuts once again this week, it's going to be really tough. I genuinely believe that this is a toss-up game, and whoever has the ball last probably wins. But I am going to lean my Niners. I pick them out of obligation every week, and it's naturally not a bad pick at all. But so give me the Niners on Monday Night Football. And that will wrap up the episode. Let me know what your pick is, what your picks are for each game. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, please. It's great for engagement. Of course, if you really enjoyed me rambling to myself here on this episode, consider liking, sharing, again, commenting, subscribing if you want more, subscribing if you want to see the other guys and me riff back and forth with each other. It's definitely a much more engaging and entertaining show, I believe, at least, when the three of us are all there. So, if you like me a little bit and you're like, I want to go see what the other guys are like too, then yeah, check that out. But I guarantee you, this is the best show you've never heard of. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.